reading requires sitting alone by yourself in a quiet room, and I have friends, intelligent friends, who don't like to read because it's not just bored. There's an almost dread that comes up, I think, here about having to be alone and having to be quiet, and you see that when you walk in. When you walk into most public spaces in America, it isn't quiet anymore. They pipe music through. And the music's easy to make fun of because it's usually really horrible music, but it seems significant that we don't want things to be quiet ever anymore.
Young man! The time has come. It is time for you to shed the cloak of the performative male. Put down the bell hooks. Put down the Virginia Woolf that you have been reading to impress that non-binary baddie who, let's face it, is way out of your league. And embrace your true nature, that of the pretentious lit bro. Put the bandana on your head, tie it tight. Cart the 1,000-page book along with you. Be all too willing to discuss it, its author, and its contents with your friends and co-workers. And only then will you truly be free. My name is Marley, and the last book I read was Infinite Jest. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this niche esoteric book before. It goes to another school, you've probably never met it, and... Sorry, getting a phone call. Hello. Wait, how many think pieces? I love this photo shoot, by the way. This photo shoot of him. It's so fucking funny. Ooh, a white boy got a little motion going. Yeah, I'd had David Foster Wallace on the brain for a little bit after I researched him in a small way for my Jeffrey Eugenides video. So what did I do? I went out and I got myself a copy of Infinite Jest, the cover of which I promptly destroyed, so I had to wrap it up like it's a school book. I wasn't really planning on reading this novel anytime soon. Then, every fucking media outlet and their mother put out a think piece about Infinite Jest. I get that it's, the novel's 30th anniversary earlier this year, and that these days we have to have discourse about everything because nothing really exists without the discourse. But still, the level of think piecing going on for a 30-year-old novel that, so far as I can tell, precious few people have any real interest in reading front to back, it struck me as kind of especially odd. Information overload in information world. We even had think pieces about the think pieces, for Christ's sake. So what was the only logical response to the think piecery? To do a little think piecing of my own. But you see, my think piece, it's the correct think piece. That's what makes mine different. Also, David Foster Wallace allegedly was not a good dude to women. I'm not really going to touch on it because this is more a video about Infinite Jest than it is a video about David Foster Wallace, but in the interest of having a good faith conversation about the book, we have to highlight that the author himself, yes, had issues. I should have a button for it at this point, I know, or a sign that I can just pull down or something, but it's out in the open now, and if this is enough to make you not want to read the book, I don't blame you. So there's a lot of think pieces, there's a lot of opinion pieces, there's a lot of talking about Infinite Jest that's going on earlier this year. And in reading some of these pieces, some key themes begin to emerge. Have we forgotten how to read Infinite Jest? Is Infinite Jest still worth reading? What makes Infinite Jest worthy read? We need to move past Infinite Jest. There's all sorts of jesting going on. Really, you could say it's infinite, the amount of jesting. But in reading these articles, do you know what is surprisingly absent? Discussion of whether or not the book itself is actually fun to read. This, it seems like a pretty big omission to me, given how the alternate title for the book was A Failed Entertainment, and blurbs on the book's cover, or really just advertisement for the book in general, seems to touch on its entertainment value, like how much fun the book is to read is a big selling point of Infinite Jest. And it's also a big deal in literary criticism, unfortunately, because of the three things that matter the most when engaging with art, the last one here, unfortunately, seems to be the most important. Let's go down to the tennis court and talk it out like, yeah. Oftentimes, discussion of whether or not a book is actually fun to read will involve discussing the book's plot, even though plot is, funnily enough, secondary to novels a lot of the time. I mean, one of the greatest books ever written, Ulysses, the plot of that book is two guys walking around. That's it. But ultimately, that's kind of what's so valuable about the novel as a medium. They can afford to spread out, take their time, relish in smaller details that movies or even TV shows often can't afford to do. Now, this is not to say that every book should be long or every book should try to do this, but if you're thinking about reading Infinite Jest or any other encyclopedic novel really, and you're complaining that the book is too long, I would try something else. That being said, we should briefly, and I mean briefly, discuss what this book is about. So, what's it about? It's about tennis and drugs, and what the perfect entertainment looks like. There's other stuff it's about too, broader themes about, America and what the end point of American exceptionalism is. It's a Hamlet rewrite, it's an extended parable on addiction, and that is where I'd like to stop talking about the plot. But the perfect entertainment part of the book was what interested me the most, at least in the first 150 so pages, and I think that's why Wallace chose to hook it in there, is so it can really draw the readers in. And it's also because it's the most, on its face, relevant to what we're living through now. Wallace is positing the end to entertainment, the ultimate time passer. What does perfect entertainment look like? Well, of course, the samizdat, I'm not pronouncing that right, I don't care. The perfect entertainment, the samizdat. It's something that you never want to stop watching. Once you lay eyes on it, that's all you want to do. You just want to keep looking at it until you die. That's all you get for plot summary. There's more going on. Of course there's more going on. This is fucking like 1,200 pages long, but though it's more fun for you to experience it on your own. Wait, what's that? The word fun, used in a review of a book that is very pretentious, and again, 1,200 pages long? Why, yes, you heard correctly. Now, I suppose it's time for us to get on with the actual review. You will need at least 2 bookmarks to read this book. You're going to need at least 2 bookmarks because you're going to need one for where you are in the actual text and another for where you are in the footnotes, because your ass is going to be flipping back and forth because there is essential information in the footnotes that your ass needs to read if you want to understand the main text. If that bothers you, you will not enjoy the book. Infinite Jest also takes some time to get going. For the first few hundred pages, yes, few hundred pages, the book feels more like a deeply interconnected collection of short stories than a cohesive novel. Before you ask, yes, these few hundred pages are necessary for Wallace to set the plot up in the way that he likes. Around 300 to 400 pages in is when I really got hooked, and that's in keeping with my highly exclusive literary theory, my theory of 1,000-page books. But if this structure or time commitment bothers you, you're not going to enjoy the book. Oh, Infinite Jest, you also have an adorably retrograde relationship with more sensitive subject matter. Much has been made about how David Foster Wallace appears to have never met a black person in his entire life, but I also think it's noteworthy that he's really never met an Irish person either. What's notable, though, is that he will not let that stop him from trying to write in their voices with decidedly ouch results. Additionally, most of the time when slurs or offensive language is being used, it's clear that it's being used by flawed characters and not by a flawed author. There is one notable exception, though, and that is that David Foster Wallace, across characters and across hundreds of pages in this book, really likes to use a certain homophobic slur to describe actions or clothing. The book was written from 1986 to 1993, and although it is generally a forward-thinking book, some of the more retrograde parts of Wallace's personality and views of the time are represented in these pages here. On a personal level, this weird slur usage was probably my least favorite part of the book. I understand that there's an argument to be made where it's like, oh, that's just how people talked, bro. Yeah, I get it, but ultimately I found it kind of needless and distracting. Now, if the slurs are a deal breaker for you, you're not going to enjoy the book. And frankly, I don't blame you if any of these issues that I've just mentioned are deal breakers. I mean, after all, your life, your books to read, right? Now, I did finish it. So why did I keep reading Infinite Jest?
The book is fun. And if I'm being perfectly honest with all of you, I just like that something can be fun and have something to say at the same time. I like that this is written with intention and it has thoughts and opinions, but it never forgets to make my jaw drop or forgets to make me burst out in laughter.
If a book were this long, this pretentious, and also boring, no one would read it. I'm sorry, that's just the truth, no one would. But me, you're asking me? And by and large, I had a great time, for reasons stated above and some other reasons besides. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this to someone at a party if I got invited to parties in the first place. Believe it or not, party invites don't tend to really flow in for a failed actor who's obsessed with problematic literature. Most nights, I drink alone. I sit and I contemplate. And I wonder where it all went wrong. Fun story though, I did try to tell a coworker about this book because I was laughing. The book's funny. I was laughing at a part of the book. And she's like, oh, what are you laughing at? And this is a sweet woman. She's nice. The part of the book that I was laughing at is a addicts meeting. And there's one new guy at the addicts meeting. It's like Alcoholics Anonymous. I can't remember exactly, but that's the setup. And they're all hugging each other. They're like, hey, this is my name. Can I get a hug? I need some support right now. So they're hugging each other. But the new guy, he says, thank you, I prefer not to hug you. And they're like, well, do you want a hug? And he's like, no, I'm good. So a guy picks him up and he grabs him by the neck. And he's like, listen, you motherfucker, I'm being vulnerable right now. You think I want to hug you? Hug me! Hug me! And I think that's funny. But I described this to my coworker and she just had this look on her face of pure abject horror. Like she was like, oh, that's dark. So, yeah, maybe don't put this in your Tinder bio, guys. Again, Infinite Jest, for the most part, early on especially, it can feel like an interconnected short story collection. And, I mean, if you're asking me, one of my favorite books of all time is Nazi Literature in the Americas by Roberto Bolaño. So I love that. There's a short story in this book. I guess I'm calling it a short story, but it's a footnote. It's footnote 304. And it is one of the most chilling pieces, one of the most effective pieces of short fiction that I have ever read in my entire life. And that's the thing about Infinite Jest. The writing is fun. Self-indulgent? Sure. Pretentious? Absolutely. But it's just fun to read. It's difficult to just take like a few sentences from a book as large as this and try to showcase what makes the writing so good and so funny. But still, I feel like I gotta like pick something out and just read a little bit of it to you so you can get like some of the rhythm. This is from a passage that's about FaceTiming, basically. It's about FaceTiming. Again, this book was written in the 1980s. This is about FaceTiming. Video telephony rendered the fantasy insupportable. Callers now found they had to compose the same sort of earnest, slightly over-intense listener's expression they had to compose for in-person exchanges. Those callers who, out of unconscious habit, succumbed to fugue-like doodling or pants crease adjustment now came off looking rude, absent-minded, or childishly self-absorbed. Callers who, even more unconsciously blemish-scanned or nostril-explored, looked up to find horrified expressions on the video faces at the other end, all of which resulted in videophonic stress. Even worse, of course, was the traumatic expulsion from Eden feeling of looking up from tracing your thumb's outline on the reminder pad or adjusting the old unit's angle of repose in your shorts, and actually seeing your videophonic interfacee idly strip a shoelace of its gumlet as she talked to you, and suddenly realizing that your whole infantile fantasy of commanding your partner's attention while you yourself got to fugue doodle and make little genital adjustments was diluted and insupportable, and that you were actually commanding not one bit more attention than you were paying here. The whole attention business was monstrously stressful, video callers found. I'm getting off track. There's a lot I could say about what worked and what didn't work for me, but that would ultimately kind of just delay me talking about what I really want to talk about, which is the Escaton. This shit hit, man. This shit means something to me. The best chapter in Infinite Jest is the Escaton. It is a magnificent roaring machine of a chapter. I'm just kind of at a loss for words. It was so good. The Escaton comes about 340 pages into the novel. If you hadn't guessed, this is also when I began to feel that the book was worth reading. It is a sequence with a concept that is really on its face incredibly juvenile, but it's executed so well that it becomes high-octane action. The following description of what the Escaton is might well make you laugh, but trust me, It's the best part of the fucking book. The Escaton is a game that is played on 4 tennis courts by 12 to 14-year-olds who are enrolled at ETA, the Enfield Tennis Academy, one of the main settings of the novel. It is a nuclear war simulation game where the nukes are dead tennis balls that are lobbed at targets scattered around the courts. The kids play as countries or alliances between countries, and there's also an overseer who runs a computer program that's designed to simulate some of the more little nitty-gritty bits of nuclear fallout that they really can't imagine all on their own. The goal of the Escaton is to win an end-of-the-world nuclear war scenario, which itself is already a really funny idea. The game, of course, devolves, but not before we get to meet my favorite character. Well, we don't meet him here, but he really comes into his own in this chapter. And I just love this guy. The Peemster, Michael Pemulis. The amount of neurotic or otherwise insane characters in Infinite Jest is quite high. It appears to have been David Foster Wallace's favorite type of character to write. Maybe deservingly so. They're very good, and he's very good at writing this type of character. The Incandenza family, the main, probably, you could call them the main characters of the novel, they are all grade A neurotics, except for Mario, who is an angel and deserves everything good in this life. They all have, like, jaw-dropping personality defects, the Incandenzas, and the other half of the book takes place at a drug recovery house, so, you know, some real well-adjusted people living there. Despite all of this, though, my favorite character is probably the most chill character in the fucking book. Michael Pemulis is a teenager. He's a tennis player enrolled at ETA, and oh my god, he's so funny, dude. He wears a yachting cap everywhere because he's a douchebag. It's such a douchebag teenager thing to do, but it's hilarious. He's also the resident drug dealer for the tennis players at ETA because they're playing tennis all the time. They're going to need drugs, but in order to get drugs from Michael Pemulis, you have to first ask him to commit a crime for you, which Pemulis is Hal Incandenza, the protagonist of the novel's best friend, and let me tell you, he doesn't give a shit about anything in his life. He doesn't give a shit about anything except for drugs and the Escaton. Pemulis gets into some bad situations later on in the novel, and he is not really seen to care at all about these situations, which makes the Escaton doubly funny because it is the only time Michael Pemulis gets excited about anything across Infinite Jest's 1,200 pages. This makes sense, after all. He is kind of the, he's like the LeBron James of Escaton. He's considered the game's best player, and he's the one who really codified it and gave the game a set of guidelines, rules to be played with. The best passages about Pemulis specifically come after the Escaton, but it's in this chapter when we really get a sense of him as a character, and that's part of why I found the Escaton to be the most rewarding chapter in Infinite Jest. I don't want to spoil any more of this chapter for you, because it is that intense of a reading experience, but I will say that if you go and you read the Escaton out of whack, just sort of read it on its own without reading the rest of the novel, it probably won't have the same effect. If you want a taster, a sort of sampling of Infinite Jest prose on a wider scale, get yourself a copy of the book, flip to note 304 in the footnotes, which is titled Notes and Errata, because David Foster Wallace was full of himself. But flip to note 304, read that. That'll give you a taste testing of the prose in the book. If you want to read the book, like you are set and you're going to read this, read it for the Escaton. Make it to the Escaton and then make your judgments. That's it. My main argument for reading Infinite Jest is the Escaton. It is the perfect summation of the novel. Absurd, funny, juvenile, smart, up its own ass, all of the above. If you were to give Infinite Jest 300 to 400 pages of your time, you get to the Escaton, you experience the Escaton, and then you decide that this book is not for you, well, that's fine, you know, who am I to judge? Fun fact, I was initially going to buddy read this with a friend of mine, and I sent her this picture. I was so excited to buddy read this with her. I finished it in about like 3 weeks, I want to say, and as of the recording of this video, she has not finished the book. But I guess that does show that this book, it's not going to grab everyone. It's not going to please all comers. Hell, there were portions of this book where my eyes glazed over, namely when Wallace gets really deep into the minutiae of some mathematical or scientific concept, and I have a very high tolerance for long, pretentious books. And all of that, the issues with the book itself, that's irrespective of David Foster Wallace's issues as a human being, which might be enough to turn some readers off like that. What this book is not is boring or dull. It feels like an uncompromised work made by someone who actually had something to say about humanity and the way we're interacting with the world around us, especially how we interact with entertainment as we continue to march into this increasingly apocalyptic version of creativity, ushered in by people who don't value creativity, and that no one with a creative brain actually seems to enjoy at all. This is a book that's fun. It's made me recoil in horror as much as it made me burst out laughing. It wildly yo-yos from one side of the emotional spectrum to the other while exploring a cast of characters that's as varied as it is deep. The strangest thing about Infinite Jest for me is how it presents this really objectively pessimistic viewpoint of a slightly in the future United States that is obsessed with entertainment, at war with its allies, and governed by a failed entertainer. And that vision of the future still feels more optimistic than what we're living through nowadays, despite the parallels between the two. Is this worth a read? In my opinion, yes. Is it for everyone? No, absolutely not. But you won't know if it's for you until you give it a try. Now will you?